Chapter 6. Chrome wondered how Kalmia would be able to confront the ogre with the difference in level. She might have casualties if she messed up while trying to escape, but he quickly erased the thought, knowing that Kalmia and others might misunderstand him as another monster, causing them to panic, so he decided to watch how things played out. Derek was seen yelling at Kalmia to pull back, to which Kalmia replied that her magic could hit the ogre and that they should be able to defeat the ogre if they worked together. Derek decided to follow what Kalmia said because he had no choice or else he would be killed by the ogre, so he activated his skill, Scorching Slash, but before he charges forward, the ogre had already attacked him, causing him to fall back a little. At that moment, Lena activated her skill, Light Body, and tried to slash at the ogre, but she was blown away. She was shocked about the ogre's crazy strength, which caused her to be Kalmia, then used her ice magic to create ice arrows and send them to the ogre, who grabbed the ice arrows and crushed them to smithereens. Kalmia realized she couldn't defeat the ogre with ice arrows after seeing this. Chrome also realized that Kalmia and others' coordination is shaky, and he wondered why such an impromptu team would venture into the dungeon's depths. Kalmia, on the other hand, decided to use the ice lance, believing that even if the attack does not defeat the ogre, they should be able to find a way through it. However, it takes a long time for her to shoot the spell, so she needs Derek and Lena to create a larger opportunity for her. Derek, however, realized that they are not high-leveled enough and are lacking in speed, magic, and power, and feared that he would perish. At that point, Kalmia instructed them to attack and draw the attention of the ogre, or else the fight would be lost. When Derek heard this, he thought of something and called Lena's attention to it, to which they both agreed, but Chrome wondered what Lena and Derek were doing. But at that moment, the ogre made its attack, to which Lena used her light body to dodge it and also try to attract the ogre's attention. But Derek signaled at Lena, who sped up picking Derek, and then ran away leaving Kalmia behind. When Kalmia saw this, she was surprised that they had left her with the ogre, but she decided to take a chance with the ice lance, which hit the ogre's arm, cutting it off, but the ogre retaliated with his club, which hit Kalmia. The ogre cried out in pain, and Chrome rushed out of his hiding place when he saw his sister's plight. When Derek saw what happened to Kalmia, he became enraged and said that it was Kalmia's fault to begin with, who insisted on venturing deep into the dungeon on such short notice, looking for her missing brother, who could have been killed because her brother was a low-level adventurer. When Chrome heard this, he was shocked. At that moment, Kalmia was seen lamenting that why her brother had to be reckless when he was so weak, but the ogre attempted to smash its club at Kalmia, but was blocked by Chrome, who got there at the moment. Chapter 7. Chrome was seen attacking the ogre because he cannot lose for Kalmia's sake. Chrome realized that the ogre had lost its left arm, so he aimed his claws at its stomach and inflicted a wound. Chrome then picked up one of the ice arrows lying around and threw it at the ogre to distract its attention, allowing him to aim for the shoulder where the left arm was missing. However, he realized that it would not be easy for him, as the ogre grabbed and twisted his wrist, causing it to fracture. He realized that even though the ogre had lost its left arm, it still had monstrous power and speed, so he decided to find a more decisive opening. At that moment, the ogre swinged its club at Chrome, who dodged it, but the ogre was seen panting as it was swinging around its club. At that moment, the ogre charged at Chrome with its fangs, but Chrome already knew that the ogre would act like this, so he immediately thrust his hands at the ogre's mouth, using it as a bait, as he was able to deliver a lethal slash at the ogre's throat with his other claws, killing it in the process. The system notified Chrome that he had gained 128 XP and leveled up to level 18. He then used his regeneration skill to regrow his arm. He then walked over to the unconscious Kalmia. Realizing that Kalmia was only concerned about him and not looking down on him, he then carried her on his back as he walked back to the dungeon's entrance, thinking about how he could make Kalmia stop coming back in soon after. He was discovered by two adventurers who mistook him for a monster. Thinking that he wanted to attack Kalmia, he ran away when he saw that they were attempting to attack him. At that moment, Kalmia awoke wondering where she was, but the adventurers walked over to her side, explained that a ghoul wanted to attack, but she felt that she was rescued, which made her remember how her brother used to carry her when they were young. But she thought it couldn't be her brother because her brother was missing, so the adventurers asked her if she is the owner of the sword beside her. When Kalmia saw the sword, she was surprised that it was her brother's sword. She then saw a small message on the blade of the sword. When she saw that he would definitely return and that she should wait for him, she burst into tears and Hunter Brothers' sword. Chrome was seen walking away from the dungeon, convinced that he only had 2 more levels before evolving again, and that this time he would become a human. Chapter 8. Chrome was seen attacking a group of bugbears, eventually killing them all and gaining 15x. He then sat down and began to eat the dead bugbears, which did not taste very good as he remembered being killed by bugbears and wondering if bugbears eat humans as well. However, he hated the fact that he can't stop himself from eating dead corpses, since he had become a ghoul. He never thought that he reasoned that because he was becoming more human, he might be able to enter the next town after his evolution. He knew, however, that he couldn't expect a big level up if he didn't fight stronger monsters, as he would prefer to avoid anything similar to Ogre in the future. He realized he wasn't in the deep part of the dungeon where he encountered the Ogre, so he decided to take his time and hunt weaker monsters, but at that moment, an attack was launched at him, which he narrowly avoided. He was surprised to see a gargoyle, a C-rank monster with a level of 21, at the location. At that moment, the gargoyle spat out an energy attack at him, which burned part of his arms, but the gargoyle then struck with its sword, which nicked Chrome at the shin, and as he tried to dodge the sword attack, he was hit by an unexpected elbow strike that was powerful. However, Chrome discovered that the gargoyle spat flames at him, blinding him, and then flew at him, which he couldn't hear either. He realized that the reason he had been able to defeat the ogre was because Kalmi's spell had taken off its arm. Even though he had leveled up, he had no hope of winning against the gargoyle, so he tried to flee, which prompted the monster to chase after him. Seeing this, he used an elbow strike on the monster, which didn't incur any scratch. When he saw this, he realized that both its level and skills are too much for him to handle. As he ran, he noticed a cliff ahead and waited for the gargoyle, who spits fire first and then charges forward with its sword. But Chrome already knew the monster would do this kind of attack, so he pretended to fall inside the pit, and then clung to the cliff wall, but the gargoyle fell for it. So he jumped on top of the gargoyle and punched at the gargoyle's head, which died upon reaching the ground, which was a result of the fall it had. However, at that moment, he gained 108 kex. Meanwhile, the system notified him that he had reached level 20. However, Chrome knew that if it hadn't been for the monster's fall damage, he would never have won. He then remembered that since he had reached the maximum level for Ghoul, evolution was the next step, so he ran to a small lake to check his reflection, and after the evolution was complete, he evolved into a shapeshifter, a C-rank monster. Chapter 9. However, Chrome noticed that he had grown much larger, and that he had a mask on his face that he couldn't remove no matter how hard he tried. But he knew it was a higher rank than Ghoul. In the meantime, he heard that evolution brings monsters closer to their ideal power, but the form he turned into is an utter and complete monster. The system then showed that Shapeshifter is an undead monster that imitates the form of the living to attack them, and that those who seize its true form never return alive. When Chrome saw the system notification, he realized that the Shapeshifter is much terrifying than a ghoul. He remembered that the system had something about imitating the living, so he checked his status and discovered that he was now a C-rank monster. He then noticed the Masquerade skill, which gave him the idea that he could change into a human, so he activated it. Soon after, he saw a reflection of his former human form, shocking him. He then tried to speak. His voice was a bit hoarse but still manageable. He believed that if he could just conceal a small portion of his face, he could pass for a human. However, not long after, he began to feel as though his power was draining. He checked the system and found that he could temporarily assume human form by using the Masquerade skill, but doing so cost 1 MP every 10 minutes. He can only transform for up to 4 hours at his maximum up of 26, which is insufficient for a city dweller. However, he can simply level up to increase his M, which gave him hope for the potential benefits of his next evolution after Shapeshifter. Chrome sensed something was wrong because it appeared to be an earthquake that later subsided, but Chrome wondered if it might have been a dungeon disaster. According to this theory, enormous monsters' corpses are buried deep underground, but the peculiar space created by the evil mana that emerges from their bodies or the dungeon can cause strange phenomena if left unchecked and allowed to accumulate for a long period of time. He may have thought that the appearance of C-rank monsters in the dungeon's outer areas was a sign of dungeon disaster, but not long after, a gargoyle suddenly charged at Chrome, but he narrowly avoided the attack. Then he picked up a stone because he didn't have claws at the time because he was in human form and threw it at the monster, which had little or no effect on the monster. The gargoyle then spewed flames and charged at Chrome with its sword, but Chrome had already switched back to Shapeshifter and struck his claws at the monster, which resulted in beheading the gargoyle's head, killing it and gaining him 90 expa. Chrome pondered how simple it was for him to eliminate the gargoyle that had him running for his life earlier, believing he could defeat an ogre on his own. Monsters are powerful, but their lack of intelligence is their weakness, which he lacks, and he also has resistance to the dungeon's mana and does not feel fatigue. He thought he was closer to the next evolution, not having to worry about how many gargoyles came at him. But at that moment, a group of gargoyles flew over, and he immediately ran away, thinking he wasn't capable of attacking all at once. However, Chrome discovered that the rate at which monsters appeared had increased, implying that something had occurred in that dungeon. Chapter 10. Chrome's exp increased his level from 20 to 21, and he noticed that his shapeshifter body was much stronger than his ghoul body, as he was able to easily defeat gargoyles than when he was a ghoul. Chrome checked his stats to see that his next evolution is at level 50, which he thought would happen sooner because of the dungeon disaster that caused C-rank monsters to appear in such a shallow place where D-rank monsters usually are, and since the dungeon disaster had already occurred, that means high-ranked monsters will appear, and they will come outside to wreak havoc. So the only way to avert a dungeon disaster is to defeat the dungeon's boss, the dungeon's heart. However, at that moment, he heard some footsteps approaching him, which were adventurers, and Chrome immediately dodged behind a nearby rock. But one of the adventurers, which was a man, Frank Frey, a level 20 adventurer, was seen saying that with the occurrence of the earthquake and all the gargoyles around, implied that a dungeon disaster is approaching, to which another male adventurer who wore a cloak over his head, Guido Gilraid, a level 19 adventurer, replied that they should go back to the guild and report it. However, Shelley Schultz, a level 18 adventurer, suggested that they try to eliminate the dungeon boss so that there are no victims. Chrome realized he might be in trouble if he fought them because their levels were much higher than Calmia's. Guido then asked Shelley why they should take such a risk, but Frank replied that dungeons get more out of hand as time passes, so there was no doubt that they had a better chance since they discovered it so early. But Guido wasn't comfortable attacking the dungeon boss alone, as he told others that the dungeon boss's level increased and changed form. So Guido thought it was risky to challenge the dungeon boss without knowing anything about it, but Frank told him that they could sell the dungeon boss's magic stone for a fortune. As he concluded that if the area becomes a monster nest, it will have a huge negative impact on commerce. So as an adventurer, rising to challenge and defend the people in the city is something they should do. But when Guido heard this, he was still not convinced about why they should take the risk. But Frank said that the reason Shelley's hometown fell into ruins was due to dungeon disaster, and when Chrome heard this, he realized that his plight is similar to Shelley. Frank then told them that he would not force them to do anything because the risk was too great, and that going back and informing others was also an important duty. Guido noticed a monster hiding at that moment, so he immediately aimed his bow and shot at the location where Chrome was hiding, which Guido did thanks to his skill, Eyes of Artemis. Chrome attempted to use his masquerade skill to change his form at that moment, but Frank drew his sword and said whoever was hiding should come out in the next 3 seconds, if it understood what he was saying, and before he finished the countdown, Chrome had already returned to his human form. So Chrome emerged from his hiding place and introduced himself as an adventurer, to which Frank apologized for not knowing Chrome was human. However, Guido asked Chrome why he was hiding in the first place, and Chrome then explained that he didn't know if they were bandits or adventurers, and even though they are not bandits, meeting up with someone else inside the dungeon usually leads to trouble. But Guido still felt that Chrome is suspicious as he considers whether Frank also thought that the way Chrome was wary of them and how he was dressed in tatters suggested that he was not the normal adventurer. Chrome, on the other hand, thought he might be able to fool them in human form, but it doesn't appear that things improved.